obscure world of parking. We use it every day, but have we really capitalized on the intricacies of our industry? In this podcast, the Parking Network will go behind the scenes and talk to industry professionals about all things parking, from the horizon of evolving technology and even stories of the old days. We hope to encourage and inspire operators and property managers alike to look at parking through a new lens. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Our Parking Industry Podcast. We have a special treat for you today. You're about to hear a bonus episode that's a little different from what we usually do here on Our Parking Industry. This is a sneak peek of something brand new we've been working on behind the scenes. It's called the Grumpy Garage. I'm sure your brain is spinning. What could this possibly be about? Now, don't let the name fool you. This show is full of wisdom, laughs, and some good old-fashioned storytelling. The Grumpy Garage brings together a crew of longtime parking pros, let's just say they've seen it all, who sit down, swap stories, and talk shop in the most unfiltered way possible. Whether you're in the industry or just parking curious, you're going to love this mix of humor, experience, and honesty. The Grumpy Garage will officially launch in late 2025, but for now, enjoy this early look inside the garage.
This is the first ever of the Grumpy Garage podcast. I'll let all of our listeners figure out why we called it Grumpy Garage. So for you and I to start this off, this is kind of like you and I at dinner one night, right? So this is just us talking about the parking industry. I think the thing just to really start with, we're in the middle of a transformational industry and it's all changes, change going on everywhere. But to me, changes are just changes and they're getting better and we're finally catching up. But all industries go through these changes. The most important thing to us is, how is the leadership in the industry responding to these changes? So I think those are things that we could talk about. You've got all of the different buildings, municipalities, universities, hospitals, all those things, events, retail centers, airports, all of those things being impacted by this. So let's just talk about how we're dealing with this. Normally when John and I are out to dinner, there's a lot of noise in the background and he can never hear what I say.
I can't. I'm deaf.
Yeah, he's deaf. So this is going to be difficult because he can actually, I think, hear what I'm saying.
Not only can I hear you, now I can respond.
You can.
Clyde, you and I have been around this industry since God was young. And I think we've seen a lot of changes.
Mm-hmm.
Frankly, the changes have come in different ways.
Right.
First of all, I think there was a time in the beginning, 30 years ago, when technology moved in and made some paradigm shifts, basically in how money was collected.
Yes.
Because when we first started, we had cigar boxes and we put the money in and it was quarters, dimes, and nickels. One of the problems in automating in those days was that how do you collect more than quarters, dimes, and nickels? A lot of places you had when you tried to collect the money, people would have to have 12 quarters, and that just didn't work. So we moved on to being able to collect dollar bills, cash, if you will. And then the next quantum leap was credit cards. And once we could collect the money, it affected how we could charge, how much we could charge. Not necessarily off street, because on off street, you could always have a guy in a booth collecting $20 bills. On street was a big deal because the most you could collect was what you could put in quarters.
I was telling the story the other day to somebody about when I was doing a lot of business on Miami Beach back in the day. And every time I would fly into Miami, I would get a rental car, drive over to Miami Beach. There was a bank right there that I knew. I would run into the bank, hand them a 20 and get back rolls of quarters because I had to have them to get through my 2 or 3 days there.
Yep. But the problem that the cities had is that they wanted to charge more, but they couldn't figure out how to do it.
Figure out how to do it, right.
As soon as technology came along and they could take credit cards in parking meters, suddenly it went from 50 cents an hour to $1 an hour, to $2 an hour, to $4 an hour, until you were paying $5, $6, $7, $8, $10 to park your car on street, which sort of made a lot of sense because the problem that we had originally was we were paying more for the less convenient spaces. In other words,
Yeah,
In
because the on-street couldn't
in
charge.
the garages, you were paying, like in New York City, you were paying $25, $50, $40 a day.
Park.
But on street, you were still paying $2, even though on street was the most convenient.
Yeah. So let me tell you, there's another story how technology has caught up to us. Krista and I were in Atlanta 6 or 8 months ago, and one of us, I won't say which one, really wanted to go. There was an ice cream parlor there, and so decided that we had to go get some ice cream. And there was on-street parking there, and instead of doing anything, there was this QR code sign there, and you had to scan the QR code. So we scanned the QR code, and there was no sign that said how much we were going to pay. So we scanned the QR code. It was $30. So we decided, screw it. The ice cream was more important than the $30. So we paid it and went to get the ice cream. But $30, I don't think I have ever in my life even seen an on-street space charge $30. But we have them now. And that's really as it should be. They're the premium spaces. And they should be paying a lot more for those. So you're right. That's been kind of the flow of the industry.
So we were in a situation where technology affected the pricing,
Yes.
because until we had the ability to use a QR code or to dip a credit card or whatever, we couldn't charge that much because we couldn't figure out how to collect it.
Right. Right.
But that's on street. Off street, we've always been able to collect it because we've got Joe Dokes sitting in a booth.
Right. Sure.
And the goals, technology goals, when you and I first came into the industry, I was selling the technology and you were using the technology.
Yes.
That was to ensure that when Joe Dokes collected the $20, that it got into the bank account.
The bank? It had to go to the bank?
Yes.
Yeah, not everybody figured that out.
And see, that was what our goal was. The whole intention of the computerized cash registers and all of those things were to ensure that you could actually compute the fee.
Yes.
We invited a customer to come in. The customer, the operator, and a cashier. And we had them sit around a table, and we put up on the board the entry time and the exit time. And we asked them to tell us how much was due based upon their rate structure.
Right.
We got 3 different answers. None of them were right. And so that's why, since we have, as an industry, come into computing the fees through the machine, once we figured out how to program the machines so that they could compute it properly,
right,
then the goal is to collect the right amount of money. I'm not sure that even with all of this technology, we're computing it properly.
Well, I think there's 2 issues here, and you're right. We do the audit, so I get to tell you all the fun stories about our audit business. And, there's still a large amount of money that should be being collected that's not being collected and not getting to the bank. We find all the time rate structure issues within the programming. One of the ones, I can't believe we're still finding this today, but we still find the rolling grace period. I thought we had.
I would say 90% of the people don't even know what that means.
You're right, and they don't. And it's a whole new wave of people coming in now. We've been doing this long enough. We've attracted a new wave of customers, and they don't know what it means. And it's in there, and it was always. I loved it because I could always go back to the owners and say, "You can fix this tonight. It'll be fixed tomorrow morning." And the value of this is more than our fee that you're paying me for this. So instantly, we just paid for ourselves. So there's all kinds of those. The other thing that I have found interesting, and it's really hard to fix now, is the rate structures that have been created over the years. None of these rate structures make sense. And what happens is they've tried to make it's a holdover. Remember, John, the funniest thing, and I talk about this now all the time, when the early days when you were talking about it, nights and weekends, we couldn't hardly collect crap, right? So we did a $5 flat fee or a $10 flat fee or whatever it was. It was a flat fee because our equipment could kind of do that without having to have people there. Well, we're here today with the most advanced electronics in the history of the parking business, and we still have flat nights and weekends fees everywhere. I guarantee you right now, it's at 97% of the locations in the country, flat fees. So we see this all over the place. But we're also seeing a new level of money missing. Whole new level, bigger than we ever saw before. It's just in a different way. We won't go into that now, but let's continue, because I think it's interesting that the story that you're telling about how those changes have happened. And, the industry fought a lot of them. They were hard to come in. They were slow to come in, but they've all helped us. We've never done a great job of getting them right, but they've all helped us. And we get more of the money in the bank.
Clyde, it's interesting. We're talking about your daily parker.
Yes, right.
But a huge amount of money is collected from contract parkers or your monthly parkers.
Right. That was always the biggest amount of money we found missing. Always the biggest amount.
Yeah, and there were usually two reasons for that. One of them is that the owner and the operator didn't know how to set the monthly fees properly.
Right.
But the other reason was that it's very easy to manipulate that money. In other words, I can, on the side, sell monthly parking and the money would go in my pocket and not in the bank. It's easy to do that.
It was very easy to do that. And I think it may still be happening today. But the problem that we found, the biggest problem that we found, was leases have all of these parking stipulations in them. Most of the time, the building owners didn't give the parking company the tenant leases. If there were changes to the parking fees through the term of this lease, the parking operator didn't even know it. So then we come along and find the parking operator charging $325 to a tenant for 30 parkers, and find out in the lease it's supposed to be $425 and there's a minimum of 50 tenants. The parking operator didn't even know it. And so we were guaranteed to be hundreds of thousands of dollars on every audit that we touched. We were going to find right there in monthly parking billing issues. Just like you said, it was always in every one of them. And Paris came along, and the people who bought integrated Paris really kind of fixed that problem, because Paris was designed for that. Now we have operators out there trying to create their own monthly parking accounts receivable system. And so we're starting over again from scratch, because it's just like everything else. What Paris did was really hard, took a long time to get it right. And the parking operators trying to use their internal tech department to create a monthly parking accounts receivable system, it's just not possible. So we're going right back through the billing and finding the same level of problems again.
Well, by the way, for the two of you out there that don't know what Clyde's talking about, Paris is a software program that basically doesn't allow you to turn on a monthly card unless it's been paid. And if the client doesn't pay for it, the card is turned off by the computer, not by the parking operator.
Right.
And you can't turn it back on until the money has been paid into the account.
Right.
Companies call this positive posting, but it's basically the same idea. The concept that you have to pay before you can. But see, this is the other big thing about all of it. It'll automatically turn the card off if it isn't paid. Because so often what'll happen is, let's say the tenant calls the operator and says, Charlie, I'm going to be 10 days late with my payment this month. And Charlie says, fine, leaves the cards on. Well, then he forgets about it. And 3 weeks later, that hasn't been paid. And everybody's still parking. However, if the operator is in a position where the operator can say, I'm sorry, I'd love to help you, but on the 5th, those cards are going to be turned off and I have no control over it. It's done by the machine. Suddenly the money appears.
Funny how that happens, huh? Yeah. So, yeah, the other thing that Paris did, probably that changed the monthly parking accounts receivable period in the audits that we did when we went into the fully integrated systems. That instantly changed what we were finding. But the other big thing that Paris did was they went in and created a section where you could input the terms of the lease contracts of all the tenants, so that it had to follow the lease contract. If this tenant's rate was supposed to go up $20 on January 1, it went up $20. It didn't depend on the operator to change it, because they'd never do it. It was done automatically. So Paris really changed the biggest audit number that we were finding at the time, monthly parking accounts receivable. Paris really fixed that challenge and did a great job of it. Still do today. So what else are we doing out there?
Well, Clyde and I classically disagree on one area.
Okay.
And that is, Clyde would like to see virtually all of the personnel removed from garages and get them out of here and turn it all over to the machine and make it so you either use your cell phone, or you pull a ticket and you pay at a machine and then you go out, or you key in your license. 100 different ways to do it. There's no need for people. I take a different approach. I believe that if we take a position that, and I'm reading off of Clyde's notes here because I'm trying to use his own
Words against me?
words against him. He believes that the parking industry is an ultimate support industry, that our goal in life is to support the buildings that we're in, the airports that we are at, and the streets that the municipalities have. Our goal is to support them in all those places.
That's right.
And I believe that that is absolutely true, except that you can't do that without some people around. And see, I think that banks are getting away from people. I haven't been in a bank since I don't know when, 1920, because I've got an ATM. But right around the corner, there's a place I can go inside where there's a person. If I want to see a person, if I've got a problem, if I don't even want to use a machine, I've got a person there. And that's true. The same thing is happening in grocery stores. I was at the grocery store the other day, and you can check yourself out now, right? Nope, not a human being in sight. There were 4 people standing up in the self-check line, and in the one line that was open, there were 20 people waiting to get checked out with a human. That'll change as young people begin to shop and don't want to deal with humans. But the truth of the matter is that grocery stores and banks and other places like this still understand. I mean, by the way, you can get on an airplane now. You can check your bags. You can get on without ever seeing a human. You don't see a human. You just wave your phone at some machine and there you go. But they're still there for the ones who need help. And I believe that building owners, once they sort themselves out, will decide that you do need some people.
So John's talking about my focus point program where I decided to prove a point. In 2005 or 6, we were finding so much money missing, and it was in every audit that we did. There was never an audit that we didn't find tons of money missing. So that came down to a couple of things. The cash control systems were difficult, and the people that were there were figuring out how to get their hands on the money, and the managers in the garages were not able to keep up with all this. So when you look at it from my perspective now as an auditor, I'm saying, well, this is pretty simple. I got to get the people's hands off the money and be able to automate this. And we were getting closer to a technology time when we could do that. I was also, not very smart, but smart enough to know one other thing that nobody knew I knew. And that was when you make a change, a big change, you better do it. Because if you kind of make a change, it doesn't work. So I knew that if I left a few people around, it would migrate back the other direction. And to prove a point, as soon as I sold the company to Central Parking, over the next 2 years, that was the battle with all of their managers putting people back in. Now, up until the day we sold to Central Parking, I had a whole bunch of Class A office buildings spread all over the country. Every manager would have said, greatest thing we've ever seen. This is great. Revenue went up by 18%. Expenses went down to about 100 and something thousand a year from 300 and 400,000 a year. And everybody said works better than it ever worked before. So it worked, but to Central, they wanted people back.
What did the Parkers say?
We never had a complaint. No, I'm serious now. As soon as we got them over that coming into a building without somebody there at the exit to hand money to, as soon as they figured it out, the customers didn't care. We never had a customer service issue with this beyond the first week or two taking over a new garage. We didn't. But I agree with you 100%. At some point, we were going to have to migrate a few people back over there as this moved on to bigger, more complex garages, even though some of them were pretty complex. And then there were some facilities where you were just going to have more people, especially like a medical center. You were not going to be able to do this. We did a medical center. We had a medical office building here in Houston that was 1,600 spaces, and we did it. But it was a challenge. But no, we didn't have the customer service issues everybody thinks we had. But I agree with you 100%. You can't get all the people out, but we did it to prove a point. If I'd have left any behind, it would have totally destroyed what I was doing. So, and it worked. And I can still tell you that all those clients today, you can call every one of them, and they were all more than happy. Since you forced me into it, I'll tell you a quick story. One of my buildings was the number 3 building. Third building that we did was the largest building in this particular downtown. It was the big stand up. Everybody knew the building. It was black glass. Everybody knew it. So the property manager at that building has now retired, so he's not in the business anymore. Fought it. He did not want me taking all of his people out. He fought it. The asset owner for the owners of the property came in and said, either they're in here or you're out. Take your pick, because we just did it in 2 other garages and it's going great. So we put it in. He fought me every step of the way. I would get calls from him just mad as hell for dreamed up reasons. And he was constantly on my ass. 6 months later, my phone rang and it was him. So I answer my phone and he says, I have to tell you something. I know I've given you a hard time, but this is the best system I've ever seen. I really appreciate what you've done. And if you need a recommendation, you got it. I went from him calling me every day, yelling at me, calling me names, to that in 6 months. So I knew it worked. And today, nobody knows how it works. None of the people who have copied it now and are using it understand the basics of it. So it's not out there anymore. The parking operators have it, and they do it totally differently than what originally we did. But you're right, John. I mean, we have to, our customers, we have to interact with customers. I was trying to prove a point. So you can hold it against me if you want to, but I was really trying to do a good thing.
I do hold it against you.
Okay, I knew you would. I would. So what else do we want to grump about today? We can, we're moving to a different industry now as we move into, I'm not real a fan of the QR codes and all this stuff, but basically what we're doing, the thing that we're seeing that's a real big issue is we have a new customer. Well, the new customer is where before our customers used to say, I have a meeting at the 3200 Wilshire building. So they would jump in their car and go to 3200 Wilshire. And if there was a parking sign, they pulled in and parked. Today, we have an educated customer who uses their cell phone to find out everything about the garage or anything around it, and making parking decisions. So marketing has become a bigger issue. And the customer having a lot more knowledge about parking, about where they're going, is another issue too. So now we have an educated customer. It's a challenge to keep up with them and keep up with what they want to know. We're really we internally, TPN, spending a lot of time right now trying to look at how we help our customers in coming up with programs to satisfy this much more, maybe educated customer, but certainly customer demanding to be more educated. Not only do they have more than we used to have, they're asking for more and for more. So it's one of the bigger issues that we see now in the parking industry is an educated customer that wants to be more and more educated and do more on their cell phone instead of just driving down to 3200 Wilshire.
Well, we talk a lot about parking operators who forget who their customers are.
Yeah, they do all the time. Right.
And we also talk a lot about operators who suddenly find themselves in the clutches of venture capitalists. And there's not just one, there's a bunch of them out there who've gotten a lot of money from basically Silicon Valley or whatever, and who have sold those venture capitalists, bankers, if you will, on using a certain kind of technology. Whether it's metropolis style, or whether it's pay on this or pay on that, or pay by credit, pay by phone. If it uses a technology, the VC guys just eat it up.
Yes.
It's great. I love it. That's what I want. Do away with the people, do away with everything. Well, I go to, interestingly enough, an ear doctor a couple times a year, just for,
You need to go more often.
Yes, dear. And they had a system installed, which I fought my way through the first time. And I went online and I entered my license number. I entered my credit card. I did all of that stuff. And every time I went to see my doctor, the gate would pop open. I would go in. I would get an email saying, thank you for visiting us, and here's your receipt. For some unknown reason, and I haven't figured out the reason yet, although I think Clyde may tell me this. I went in the other day and the system had been jerked out, although I found it working perfectly. And another system had been put in that wasn't quite as fancy. And
was there an operator change?
Not sure. I don't think so. What I sniffed around and found out was that the system that I liked was too expensive.
Well, see, you just brought up something really, really important. What you've just brought up is as we move into these new technology centric systems away from the hardware that back in your CCOM days you were used to building a lot of hardware. Once you move into nothing more than the only hardware there almost as a gate and a technology driven system, well, there's no expense in changing the equipment. Nothing. Where it used to be $250,000 to change equipment out, now, it may be 50 or less. And the other difference is the deal that you get as the operator on the back end to be able to stick user fees on there means you can make more money.
Well,
There you go.
the cost of the equipment wasn't the case because there was a pay on foot machine on every floor in the garage, which costs whatever they cost, 75 grand or whatever they are,
Yeah,
100
right.
grand.
A lot of money. Right.
And there was only one in, one out. It wasn't like before. There were no pay on foot machines in the garage. You either, while you were waiting for your doctor, you went online and fiddled with it, or you paid at exit. And the cost I was talking about was not the cost of the equipment to change it out. It was the cost to the owner from either the operator or the technology supplier.
The software fees.
Yeah.
The SaaS fees, right. Yeah, so they got a better deal on the SaaS fees. And that's what we're seeing. So the decisions to buy and install parks equipment today is changing, and it is changing now not to the owner's advantage. It's changing to the operators and how many ways they can get their finger in to get paid. Now, look, and I'll tell every one of them every day, the operators have never been paid enough. They've never made enough money in what the building owners ask them to do. I have nothing against operators making more money off of what they're expected to do and perform, but you've got to do it the right way. And I think now we're trying to sneak in the back door in doing this, and I'm certainly not going to be in favor of that. But we are seeing this equipment as it becomes less and less mechanical. I mean, I don't think on a one in, one out reasonable or two in, two out reasonable size parking operation, I would not want to be in the business of selling pay and foot stations. Because I can't imagine anybody wanting to put those in. Pay on your cell phone, scan your QR code somewhere and leave is what's coming. I think the biggest problem we're having with that is the big equipment manufacturers have been slow to catch up, which is normal in any industry, nothing different in the parking industry. And we're being flooded with the out-of-country tech kids who have some money thrown at them and are over here in the U.S. in the big market trying to hit this big market with software that's really not proven and may not really be what we need in our business. You certainly saw enough of those at your conventions where all the new, that was one of the great things I wanted to ask you but you've certainly seen this in the last 10 years in your PI convention where new tech, there was always this flow of new tech vendors coming in and buying your booth and buying a booth at your shows. And I think, I guess that's normal, but what that really means is, in my perspective, is the parking guys have to be better purchasers because you've got to see these new tech crap coming at you from all directions and make a purchase decision. And you can't buy it like you used to. You can't do it like you used to do it and say, well, this guy over here took me and bought me more drinks at the bar, so I'm buying that equipment for this garage. You can't make those decisions anymore. You've got to make decisions about your knowledge of how this stuff works.
But the question then is, how the hell do you know it works?
Well, you don't.
I mean, you get some smart kid.
Yeah.
Up in Silicon Valley, and he misses his flight because he couldn't find a place to park. And so he decides
off he goes. I'm going to count cars, right?
Yes. So he decides, but the parking business is easy. So he's gonna write some code, and he's gonna come up with a way so he won't miss his plane next time. So he does this, and then he comes to a trade show, and he says, "Look, I've got the solution to not missing your plane." And the solution is da da da. The problem is it works great, like everything does, in the
With
lab.
no cars. If there are no cars there, it works really good, right?
Yeah. But when you hook it up to a actual physical garage, it has no clue. Or it works in a garage with 100 cars or 100 transactions a day, but won't work with 1,000. Or it works with 1,000, but doesn't work with 100. Or it doesn't work at all. Or, well, we haven't tweaked that yet. Or, well, and how do you know? Usually, these guys have no locations. They
Yeah,
have no installation. Okay, well, we've got an installation out in Duluth. Well, can you give me the phone number? I want to talk to the guy in Duluth. Well,
yeah,
and well, yeah, okay. Or you talk to the guy in Duluth, and the guy in Duluth says, yeah, that sort of works.
yeah. Well, we had one of those in 2018 or 19 that was from India. They came over here with this fantastic story of all the technology they have, and they said they had it in thousands of locations in Europe. And so we flew them here with to put into 2 test garages that we were going to test to see how it worked. At the end of 3 days of trying to get it installed, they never got it installed. They couldn't get it put in. And then the funniest part of the story is they're with me. We're in Austin. They said, well, we're here. We really want to go see the Space Center. Isn't that in Houston where you live, Clyde? Yeah, it's in Houston. And I said, so yeah, sure. They were talking about how to get there. And I said, well, you can fly. And they said, well, maybe we could, how can we get there? I said, well, why don't you just rent a car? You're here, rent a car, drive over. You'll get to drive over there, see Houston. You can drive around while you're there and drive back. And they said, and they start talking to each other and come back to me and say, well, neither of us have ever driven a car before. I said, but you're in the parking business. So the reality is, and so then I called, what's his name? Your guy in Europe, in England. I called Peter and said, Peter, here's a company that says they're sold into thousands of locations in Europe. You should know who they are. He said, never heard of them. I said, but they said they're in these locations and this location and these companies' locations. I said, you know those guys, give them a call. So he calls me back and he says, do you want me to set up filing criminal charges against them? Well, he knows these guys. Well, they've improved their story and they're back here again now selling. So it was an interesting time because it was an awful lot of work to finally prove that they didn't know what they were doing and they also couldn't drive.
Well, see, software to most people is a mystery.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Hardware isn't. Gates go up, gates go down. Card goes into a slot, gate goes up.
Tickets
Card
jumps
goes in a
out.
slot, doesn't go up. Why doesn't it go up? It's been turned off. Okay. So this is easy to understand. But software is little bits of silicon on circuit boards and electrons flowing through it.
Right.
It is a mystery. And
Well,
it's easy to describe what this stuff does, but it's not as easy to show how it.
right. So I was talking to somebody the other day, and my statement on that very subject was, for the last 80 years, I'll give it a break, 60 years, you knew, I knew, and every other potential parking customer out there knew. When I drive into a garage, I drive in, there's a button over there somewhere, I punch that button, it gives me a ticket. And that ticket tells everybody how long I've been there, what time I came in. When I go to the exit, I put the ticket in, it says you owe $20, and I pay with a credit card. I drive into a garage, I have no clue. When you drive up there, I don't know how I'm supposed to get into this place. There's no ticket spitter. A thing there, a sign that says maybe scan a QR code. I don't have a QR code. So what we've done is we've taken the entire world knew when you drove into a garage, you reached over, punched a button, pulled a ticket. Now I don't know what you do. And I'm parking a lot of them every month. And I still, every time I pull into one, I'm wondering, what's my challenge going to be today? And I don't think that's a good way to treat your customers. We've got to solve some of this transition. It's a transitional period, and I try to always give that a break, and that we're going through this, we'll get through it. But at some point, you've got to stop giving it a break and say, we've got to settle on what we're going to do for the next 20 years. And it's got to be narrowed down to basically one thing. We can't have customers going into the future, every one of them trying to figure out, do I use my cell phone? Do I have a program on my cell phone? Do I do this? Do I have to download an app? I don't know. You can't have that.
Which takes us to an entirely different conversation. A lot of cities are buying into, and rightly so because it works, a cell phone app to pay your parking.
Yes.
Right?
For it, 100%.
on-street parking.
Right.
And I guess it makes some sense. But I was about to say 15. Let's say there are 5 major companies that supply these apps, and each city has a different one. Now, that may not make much of a difference in Houston, but in the city of Los Angeles, I actually live 2 blocks from Culver City, which is different.
Totally different.
I live half a mile from Santa Monica, which is different. I live a mile from Beverly Hills, which is different, but I still live in Los Angeles.
Right.
And each of them has a different one of these programs. So for me to park and use my cell phone, I have to have 4 different ones.
And then where we went to dinner one night down on Duckwaller Beach or somewhere down there, and nothing worked. We just walked away.
Yeah, we couldn't figure. Here we are. We've got 200 years of parking experience, standing in front of a pay machine, and we can't make it work.
So we figured that was probably bad for the typical customer, or maybe the typical customers knew more than we did.
I've got a story. I was sitting on a jury, and so I go down to the courthouse, which is near LAX.
Right.
And you park and you pay at a pay-on-foot machine.
Right.
And I don't know, you enter your license number or your space number or something. And I'm standing in front of the machine and I can't figure out what to do. And this guy comes up next to me and he says, "Oh, well, first you push this button." And so I start, and he walks me through it. And I thanked him and I said, "Well, are you on the jury?" He says, "No, I'm the defendant." So he'd been there a number of times before.
Yeah, he was getting pretty good at this. Yeah, so that's the problem with some of the new stuff that comes out, that we've made it more difficult for our typical customers to be able to do. You have another one. You have one. I see this in a lot of places, but you have one location down by Venice Beach that I can't remember the name of the little tiny community that it's in, but it's a whole row of parking meters off of an alley back there, and they're all facing southwest. You can't see the meter. You can't see the little screen in there because the sun's got it blanked out. So you can see everybody there. When they go up to pay, they're looking, and then they're trying to cover it up, and they're trying to look and figure out how much they're supposed to pay. We have to do a better job. Every time I go there, I say, I wonder if I just don't pay, would they ever catch me? Probably not, but they do. So I figure it out. I bring my sunglasses and special shades with me now when I go there, that location.
I don't. I just stick my card in, push some buttons, and leave. And hopefully it turns green.
Yeah.
And I pay whatever it asks.
So we wonder why people hate the parking business so much. We've worked really hard at making them dislike us, right? So we're going to wrap this up. I think this has been off to a good start with Grumpy Garage, and it's a pleasure. This helps me. This actually saves me a lot of money because now I don't have to fly to Los Angeles all the time just to have dinner with John.
Yeah, but I'm missing dinner.
Oh, well, shoot. Okay, so I'll be out there in 2 weeks.
And that's a wrap on this special sneak peek of the Grumpy Garage. We hope you enjoyed hanging out with the crew and getting a taste of what's to come. There's plenty more where that came from. More stories, more laughs, and definitely more opinions. Be sure to follow us here so you don't miss any updates, and keep an eye out for the official premiere of the Grumpy Garage later this year. Thanks for listening, and as always, we'll see you next time on the Our Parking Industry Podcast. To quote one of the greatest business minds of our time, Charles Munger, he said, "The best thing a human can do is help another human being know more." Here on Our Parking Industry Podcast, we want to provide knowledge and resources. If you heard something that sparked your curiosity in today's episode, please reach out on our socials at TPN Consulting. You can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Don't forget to subscribe and follow. See you next time on Our Parking Industry.